Okay, let's unpack this. If you are learning a new language right now, or, if you've ever found yourself just struggling to communicate beyond the simplest phrases, you know that feeling.
Oh, yeah.
That heavy thinking feeling, the sheer exhaustion of it.
It's the feeling of running a really inefficient piece of mental software.
Exactly. Because every single word you hear, every sentence you're trying to build, it forces you through this exhausting 3-step process, mental translation.
And that mental detour is, well, it's the reality for every beginner. And it's both a necessary step and really the biggest hurdle to true fluency.
Right.
Think of it as a computational tax your brain has to pay for every single interaction.
But then you talk to the advanced learners, and they all describe this moment of transformation. They talk about when the words stop feeling like vocabulary lists that they're, manipulating, and they start flowing directly.
Without the tedious filter of their native tongue.
That moment, that transformation, that is the holy grail.
Yeah.
It's when that deep linguistic shift happens, where you're no longer just communicating. You're truly beginning to think in the new language. You stop translating and you start inhabiting.
Exactly. And this isn't just a subjective feeling of, oh, this is easier now. It's a profound neurological and cognitive transformation.
Mm-hmm.
So this deep dive is really for you, the curious learner who wants to know the mechanics behind that shift. We are going to dissect the psychology, the hard neuroscience of the brain's rewiring, and the real-world consequences of this linguistic liberation.
And we're drawing on insights from the latest research and really the collective wisdom of thousands of successful language journeys to give you a detailed, actionable blueprint for accelerating this cognitive leap and fundamentally changing the way you think.
So before we can talk about the path to liberation, we first need to really understand the cognitive default. I mean, why does the brain insist on translating in the first place?
Right. What's the logic behind it?
Well, when you begin to acquire a new language, you aren't building a new structure from scratch. You're trying to lay, let's say, new plumbing in a house that already has a fully functioning, highly efficient system.
And that existing system, our native language, our L1, it isn't just a tool for conversation. It's like the very infrastructure of thought itself.
It is.
It dictates how we categorize things, how we perceive time, where our default neural pathways are.
And that is the core issue. Your brain, above all else, values efficiency. The moment a new stimulus arrives, a word, a sentence structure, it immediately looks for the path of least resistance.
And that path, in the beginning, runs straight through the established pathways of your native tongue.
Which leads to that predictable, cumbersome 3-step process that holds every single beginner back.
Let's break those steps down, because I think understanding the process is the first step to interrupting it.
Okay, so the process starts when you hear or read something in the new language, the L2. That's step 1, input. But instead of processing that input directly for meaning, your brain immediately moves to step 2, mental translation. It converts every word, every phrase into its L1 equivalent.
Okay.
Only once that L1 translation is complete can the brain really process the meaning and then formulate an idea for a response.
And then comes step 3.
Then comes step 3, reverse translation and output, where you have to convert your L1 idea back into the L2 structure, hoping it makes sense.
That sounds like a triple transfer mechanism. It must put an incredible load on our working memory.
An immense load.
It's no wonder you feel completely exhausted after a 40-minute conversation trying to manage that internal ping-pong match.
The cognitive load is, well, it's immense, and that is precisely the cost of the detour. In computational terms, working memory has a very limited capacity. It's like the RAM on your computer.
Right.
So when you're translating, you are simultaneously holding the L2 structure, the L1 structure, the actual meaning, the grammar rules for both, and the conversation's context, all active at once. This high resource utilization is simply unsustainable for real-time fluency.
So why does the brain choose this exhausting route? I mean, there has to be a rationale for this protective mechanism.
There are several compelling cognitive reasons. The first is just the simple comfort zone we mentioned. The brain prefers familiar, established pathways because they require less energy and deliver predictable results.
The brain is fundamentally lazy.
It is. Changing those pathways requires a massive, concentrated effort.
Right. It's saying, I know the answer in English, so let's just check that box first.
And that leads right to the second major reason, semantic mapping. When we learn new vocabulary, we often rely on linking the new L2 word directly to the stable reference point of the L1 word.
So the word for dog in Spanish, perro, Doesn't immediately link to the concept of a free four-legged animal in your mind.
No, it links to the English word dog, which then links to the concept.
So the L1 word becomes the anchor. And if we keep relying on that anchor, the L2 word never develops its own independent link to the underlying concept. We're forever tethered to the native structure.
Precisely. If you only see perro as the word for dog, you can't truly understand the nuance of, say, perrito, or how the concept of the animal might be used idiomatically in Spanish culture until you cut that English anchor and link perro directly to the conceptual network.
And the final key reason you noted is error avoidance. That mental translation detour acts as a kind of comprehensive security check.
Absolutely. The learner is terrified of being misunderstood, sounding clumsy, or, embarrassing themselves.
Of course.
The mental translation acts as a double-check system. It gives a false sense of security that you're getting the grammar or word choice right, even though this hesitation drastically reduces speed and fluency.
So you're trading flow for perceived accuracy.
You are. It's the language learner's safety net. But that safety net eventually becomes a cage, holding you back from true mastery. That reliance on L1 is ultimately just incompatible with real-time fluid conversation.
That's why that analogy works so well. It's like running with ankle weights.
Exactly. Initially, they force you to be precise and deliberate in your form. They help you build the muscle, ensuring you understand that, okay, the verb comes here, or the adjective comes there. But if you never take them off, you will never be able to run a full marathon at full speed.
They are temporary, necessary tools that have to be discarded for genuine liberation. Our mission, then, is to identify those weights and give you the tools to consciously take them off. Okay, let's focus on the breakthrough, that feeling that every learner is chasing. A lot of people who achieve this shift, they remember the exact environment or conversation where it happened.
Yeah.
You're engaged, maybe you're arguing a point, maybe you're laughing so hard you forget yourself, and suddenly the words aren't coming from that deep well of your mental dictionary. They're just flowing from somewhere inside.
Fluidly, organically, and most importantly, without the preceding mental detour.
It's that moment of surprise at the sheer ease, the lack of effort.
And that ease is directly linked to immense, measurable cognitive efficiency. The instant you stop translating, your brain stops running two parallel language programs at the same time.
So all the resources that were dedicated to managing that conflict are immediately freed up.
They're reallocated.
And what does the brain do with all that suddenly available bandwidth?
It reallocates those resources from conscious executive function, the problem-solving parts of the brain, to deeper, more immediate processing. Think of it like a computer moving from running in safe mode, constantly monitoring for internal errors, to running in full optimized mode.
Processing speed just shoots up.
Dramatically. You are no longer juggling concepts, grammar rules, and vocabulary across two different competing systems.
We move then from conscious, effortful construction, where we're actively applying rules, to something more automatic, more instinctive.
Exactly. And this shift is what allows the speaker to truly attune to the L2 structure. You stop seeing the language as a substitution code where you just swap one L1 word for an L2 word.
Right.
Instead, you begin to grasp the organic logic and the idiomatic architecture of the new tongue.
This is so critical, not just for speed, but for authenticity. We know that literal word-for-word translation often sounds alien, awkward, or just.
Or nonsensical to a native speaker.
Yeah.
Because every language packages meaning differently. The textbook example we often cite is that realization that in Spanish, you don't say, I am hungry, yo soy hambriento. You say, I have hunger, tengo hambre. When you are thinking directly, you don't translate the concept of being hungry into English and then back into Spanish word by word. You immediately access the concept node for that physical state, and the Spanish structure, tengo hambre, just flows out instinctively.
That realization that tengo hambre is a unified conceptual unit, not three separate words that need to be mediated. That is the undeniable sign that the logical structure of the new language has supplanted the structure of the old.
The L2 rules are now the default.
Yeah.
And this is where it gets truly transformative, the emotional shift. The source material highlights that this transition involves greater resonance and a more immediate sense of presence. And this is because the emotional buffer is removed.
The translation buffer. That sounds like a piece of linguistic insulation.
That's a perfect way to put it. When you are filtering everything through your L1, you're experiencing the emotion of the L2 input only after it has been colored and shaped by the memory and the historical emotional weight of your native tongue.
So your L1 has decades of stored trauma, joy, context, all attached to every word.
Of course.
So when someone criticizes you in L2, if you translate it first, you feel that criticism filtered through all the established pain points and triggers of your L1 identity.
Precisely. But when you process the L2 criticism directly, you receive the raw input. This is why so many bilinguals report that they feel less emotionally charged, or sometimes even more rational, when they're discussing sensitive topics in their second language.
The words are bypassing decades of associated neural circuitry tied to your original linguistic self.
Exactly.
But the source material also noted that surprising effect of like swearing or strong emotional language, that it sometimes hits differently.
And that's the flip side of the decoupling. If the emotional charge is muted for criticism, it can be intensified for things like humor or anger because you're processing the raw cultural meaning without the familiar restraint of your native language.
So you're inhabiting a new emotional space.
You are. The words themselves suddenly hold new cultural power. You are more present in the moment because you are receiving and sending unfiltered emotional communication, which is impossible when you are stuck constantly performing a mental dictionary lookup. The benefits of shedding that translation habit, they extend far beyond just simple conversation speed. Once the cognitive detour is eliminated, the brain starts to exhibit these true cognitive superpowers that fundamentally reshape your perception and your problem-solving architecture.
The first one, and maybe the most miraculous one to the learner, is the rise of intuition. That moment when you just know if a sentence sounds right, even if you can't recite the associated grammar rule.
This phenomenon, which feels like magic, is pure high-speed implicit learning. When you operate directly in the language, your brain is functioning as a massive unconscious data logger. Every correct sentence, every idiomatic expression you hear or read or produce, it feeds into an internal statistical model.
Your brain is running millions of real-time feedback loops.
It is.
So intuition isn't some gift. It's the unconscious manifestation of massive data absorption and pattern matching. It's your brain just being a better computer when it's not bogged down by translation.
Exactly. If translation is like consciously consulting a detailed map and, street-by-street directions before every step, intuition is simply knowing the geography intimately.
You're navigating by feel, not by conscious calculation.
Exactly. And this ability builds real-time mastery of complex linguistic structures, similar to how children develop grammar before they can even read.
And this intimacy leads to the second massive gain: cultural proximity. You noted that translation acts as a filter. If I translate a Japanese expression into English, I only get the literal meaning, not the weight, the history, the social context of the original phrase.
By thinking directly, you bypass that filter and you absorb the actual worldview that's embedded in the language. Every language makes different things easy or awkward to say. They force you to categorize reality in a specific way. For example, the need in Japanese to select the appropriate level of politeness or formality keigo before you speak immediately attunes you to hierarchy and social positioning.
That's a profound observation. The language structure itself forces a subtle shift in your personality settings to calibrate for the culture.
It does. Now, contrast that with, say, Spanish, where the extensive use of diminutives, the quito or ita for objects or people, can subtly nudge the speaker toward expressive warmth and emotional connection. The language prioritizes intimacy.
You begin to internalize these norms.
You do. When you stop translating, you stop being an English-speaking entity trying to communicate Spanish ideas, and you become functionally a Spanish-speaking entity for that moment. This is true identity expansion.
And beyond the cultural shift, you cite recent studies linking operating without translation to enhanced cognitive flexibility and problem solving. I want to understand the mechanics of that better. Why is simply not translating making me a better problem solver in, non-linguistic areas?
The mechanism is the constant high-speed switching required when you are genuinely bilingual and thinking directly in two languages. If you are translating, you're using one language's structure, the L1, to power the other.
Okay.
But when you're thinking directly, you maintain two entirely separate active linguistic systems. Switching between these systems, a process called code switching, is like a high-intensity workout for the executive control centers of the brain.
So every time I mentally shift from thinking about my email in English to, say, narrating my grocery list in Italian, I'm performing an active switch task?
You are. And this strengthens the cognitive muscles responsible for shifting attention, adapting to new rules, inhibiting irrelevant information, and managing conflicting demands. That skill set, cognitive flexibility, is a core ingredient for abstract thought, creativity, and effective problem solving in any scenario.
Whether you're trying to debug a piece of code or organize a complex project.
It's a huge, often unseen benefit of true bilingualism.
And finally, on a deeply personal level, we gain the ability to foster truly deepening relationships.
This is the emotional payoff. When that mental self-check, the constant rewinding for accuracy disappears, conversations become genuinely reciprocal. You gain the ability to listen actively because your brain isn't constantly formulating its response through a 3-step translation.
Right.
You can react authentically, access wit, nuance, and sarcasm instantly. That level of effortless, real-time engagement builds trust and intimacy that is impossible when there is even a half-second translation lag. To really solidify why this shift is so crucial, we have to anchor it in neuroscience. Brain imaging lets us observe what's happening under the hood, comparing the physical neural activity of translation modes versus direct mode.
And they're functionally two different states of consciousness.
They are.
So what does that constant high-effort translation look like on an fMRI scan? Where's the brain struggling the most?
When a learner is firmly in translation mode, we see dramatic, widespread activity. 2 areas are particularly active. First, the left inferior frontal gyrus, or LIFG, which is the primary control center for language conflict and inhibition. This area is working overtime to suppress the native language system, which is constantly trying to assert its dominance while simultaneously activating the L2 system.
So the LIFG is the brain's traffic cop, constantly trying to manage the conflict between 2 competing sets of language rules and vocabulary. That sounds exhausting.
It is. Secondly, we see high activity in broader prefrontal areas, specifically the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the DLPFC. This area is responsible for executive functions like maintaining goals, planning complex actions, managing working memory load. The high activity here shows the process is conscious, it's effortful, and it requires deliberate problem solving. It's like using the main CPU to perform tasks that should be handled by more specialized processors.
So translation mode is characterized by conflict management, the LIFG, and massive working memory overhead, the DLPFC. It's an unsustainable high-energy state.
Precisely. Now let's compare that to direct mode. When advanced speakers engage in direct thought or speech, the entire pattern just streamlines. The activity becomes intensely focused and localized in the core language centers. Wernicke's area for comprehension and Broca's area for production.
And the DLPFC and LIFG, those busy conflict managers, they quiet down significantly.
And that's the key metric. The diminished activity in those frontal control regions is the clearest neurological evidence that the processing has become automatic. The brain is no longer mediating a conflict. It is simply executing an integrated instinctual function.
So the L2 concept links directly to the production area without needing the L1 intermediary check.
Yep.
This sounds like a physical restructuring, not just an increase in processing speed. Are we talking about structural changes in the white matter of the brain?
We are. The shift represents a genuine structural reorganization of mental circuitry. When the brain forms these new, efficient L2 pathways, it's a process of neuroplasticity. We are creating direct neural shortcuts between the conceptual node and the new language's phonological and semantic representations.
Wow.
This involves strengthening existing connections and, over time, the process of myelination coating those new pathways in a fatty sheath that speeds up signal transmission, making that direct connection rapid and automatic.
That makes the process sound very deliberate, which brings us to the time frame. How long until the learner can expect to see this rewiring take effect? Is there a minimum number of hours required?
The time frame is, well, it's intensely individual. There's no one-size-fits-all. It depends on the complexity of the L2 relative to the L1, but most critically, it depends on intensity and motivation.
Right.
Research suggests that some individuals in high-intensity immersive situations studying 8 hours a day can begin to experience that switch after a year. For those studying casually, it can take several years.
So we can't give a magic number. But the science does confirm that the effort you put in directly influences the speed of this structural change.
Absolutely. The research clearly shows that deliberate, focused practice and immersion accelerate the needed rewiring.
And why is that?
Because when the stakes are high, the brain releases key neurotransmitters like dopamine, which signal that this information is important for survival or goal attainment. This heightened attention and motivational state enhances neuroplasticity.
So the conscious effort of forcing yourself to process directly, even when it's uncomfortable, acts as a massive speed booster for this rewiring process.
It does. You have to put the system under pressure to get it to build those better highways.
So the learner has achieved the magical moment. The words are flowing, they're thinking directly in the language for simple tasks, they feel like they have arrived, only to be hit with a new set of surprises and challenges that can make it feel like they've immediately regressed.
Yes.
It's crucial we validate this experience so the learner doesn't panic.
This is maybe the most important section for managing expectations. The breakthrough is rarely a permanent, complete light switch. It's a gradient shift, and understanding the inevitable setbacks is key to pushing through them.
And the first unexpected challenge is the return to translation. Even after the shift, the L1 keeps asserting itself in specific contexts.
That's entirely normal, and it's actually a diagnostic tool. You will find that you can think directly about concrete matters. I need bread, the train is late, my shirt is blue. But when you encounter complex, highly abstract, or deeply personal topics, things like advanced philosophy, economic theory, or expressing deep emotional vulnerability, your brain, finding a vocabulary gap or a lack of established L2 emotional circuits, will instinctively retreat to the safety of the L1.
So it's a signpost showing you exactly where the frontier of your L2 world currently lies.
Yeah.
If you can only discuss particle physics in English, you know exactly where your German vocabulary needs work.
Precisely. And the key here is not to panic, but to try circumlocution. Explaining the concept using the L2 words you do know, rather than instantly translating the missing word from L1. That forces the brain to build the concept in L2 structures immediately.
Another common frustration that follows a breakthrough is what the source calls the consolidation plateau. That sudden, maddening feeling that progress has just halted.
That plateau is not stagnation, it is integration. Imagine you just spent 6 months building the main foundation of a house. That was the breakthrough.
Right.
Now your brain is consolidating that foundation, pouring the concrete, running the electrical wiring, making sure the basic structure is sound before it starts building the second floor.
Right.
You are thinking directly about routine things, but applying that knowledge to new contexts, say a complicated work presentation or a new kind of social gathering, is difficult. Your brain needs downtime to solidify the existing knowledge before it can absorb the next burst of complexity.
So if you feel like you're not learning new things, you're actually just making the things you already know permanent and efficient.
Exactly. You should view it as a crucial feature of deep learning. Related to this is the challenge of emotional nuance taking time. We discussed the emotional shift, but the fully integrated self, capable of culturally appropriate flirting, sarcasm, or intense debate, that takes years.
Why does the cultural baggage take so long to internalize?
Because it requires more than just vocabulary. It requires cultural context and memory association. You have to experience and remember what causes genuine laughter, what constitutes an insult, and what levels of directness are acceptable.
I see.
This internalization of social norms is why truly advanced bilinguals often report feeling like different people in each language. They are adopting the social persona that's calibrated for that specific linguistic universe.
And finally, the universal bilingual glitch that causes instantaneous panic. The word blackouts.
The dreaded language interference. This is the moment you reach for a common, simple word, say cup or tomorrow, and it just disappears from both your L1 and your L2 at the same time. You know the concept, but the linguistic label is gone.
And it feels like an existential failure, like your brain is breaking.
But in reality, it's the strange, momentary cost of genuine integration. Your languages are no longer separate file cabinets in the brain. They've merged into one highly intricate, interconnected system. When a search query runs, the system occasionally returns an error, temporarily locking both related files. Instead of viewing this with panic, the learner should recognize it as tangible proof of deep structural integration. The brain is reorganizing, and a minor hiccup proves the systems are now inseparable.
Okay, now we shift to the most critical section for you, the learner. The breakthrough to direct thinking is not passive, it is trained. You have to deliberately teach your brain to bypass that mental translation safety net.
And we have 7 research-backed strategies that accelerate this rewiring process.
Let's start with the foundation, the necessary mindset shift. Strategy 1, set the intention, embrace imperfection.
This is about recognizing that thinking directly is a skill set that requires patience, not a benchmark you hit. The single greatest barrier to direct thought is the fear of being wrong.
Right. You must give yourself permission to sound messy, clumsy, or wrong. Normalize tiny direct thinking moments. A 5-second internal thought. A single unplanned sentence, rather than aiming for perfect fluency. The internal pressure to be precise is the biggest anchor dragging you back to the L1 safety check.
So start by consciously stating, for the next 5 minutes, I will not translate.
Exactly.
That acceptance of imperfection allows the brain to take risks, which leads directly to the next crucial strategy. Flood the brain with input, especially listening.
Immersion is non-negotiable, but the way you consume input matters. Passive listening isn't enough. You need consistent exposure to native materials, podcasts, foreign news, shows, audiobooks that force your brain to instinctively reach for meaning over translation.
You have to overwhelm the brain to find a more efficient path.
You do.
So how do we focus on gist and rhythm without constantly stopping to translate every unknown word?
The crucial instruction is to allow yourself to be comfortable with, say, 70% comprehension. When you encounter an unknown word, do not pause. Instead, focus on the gist, the rhythm, and the emotional tone.
What's the speaker feeling? Where's the stress in the sentence?
Exactly. This trains the brain to infer meaning from context and structure, bypassing the need to define every single word, which is the definition of translation.
Next, the strategy that feels the strangest. Talk to yourself in the language.
This is one of the most powerful and accessible tools because it entirely removes audience pressure. Your internal voice is the core of direct thought, so you start narrating your life internally, consistently, for short bursts throughout the day.
Okay, give us some highly specific, practical examples of when to do this.
Do it when you have uninterrupted mundane tasks. While you're showering, describe the temperature of the water, the brand of soap, what you need to do later. While commuting, narrate the traffic, the destination, your observations about the world around you.
So you're building immediate internal fluency with common verbs and phrases.
You are. And try performing internal grammar drills, too. If you're learning French, think, yesterday I went to the store. Tomorrow I will go to the gym. This forces direct conjugation without a textbook.
Strategy number 4, utilize language islands.
Language islands are memorized, rehearsed chunks full, grammatically correct sentences or idiomatic expressions that apply to high-frequency situations. Greeting, ordering food, expressing core opinions, asking for clarification.
So you're learning sentences as single units of meaning, not as individual words.
Yes.
So instead of trying to piece together, I want to politely ask where the bathroom is, you memorize the appropriate cultural phrase as a single island you can deploy instantly.
Exactly. This gives you immediate fluency in common contexts, allowing you to speak without the necessity of conscious word-by-word construction. When the pressure is on, you reach for the prefabricated island, which reinforces direct memory retrieval and gives your conscious brain a break.
Strategy number 5, write for yourself without translating.
This eliminates the translation safety net because physically writing forces sustained L2 thought. You should aim for free writing or stream of consciousness journaling.
And the rule is simple.
Simple. If you don't know a word, you must find a way to express the idea using the words you already know. Circumlocution, as we discussed. Do not look up the word in a bilingual dictionary, and absolutely do not write the sentence in L1 first.
What's a simple starting point for someone who finds this intimidating?
Start by listing 3 things you're grateful for, 3 things you ate that day, and 3 things you need to accomplish tomorrow. Just 3 bullet points. Consistency over complexity. This daily practice strengthens the internal pathways needed for sustained direct thought, moving from simple ideas to complex arguments over time.
Strategy number 6 is the inevitable step. Engage in immersive experiences.
Seek out language exchanges, conversation partners, travel. These create high-stakes moments that are intensely motivating for the brain. When you are conversing in real time with a native speaker, the physical and emotional cost of translation hesitation is simply too high.
The conversation moves on without you.
It does. This pressure forces the brain to find the most efficient solution, which is direct thinking, and it accelerates the neural shift dramatically.
And finally, the most philosophical strategy, but maybe the most potent. Accept and embrace mistakes.
This is the absolute non-negotiable step. The fear of error is the primary engine driving the translation loop. If you are constantly double-checking in L1 to ensure correctness, you will never achieve speed.
Right.
Mistakes are not a sign of failure. They are the tuition paid for fluency. Every time you make a mistake and are corrected or correct yourself, you provide a clear, high-impact feedback loop to your brain, reinforcing the correct intuitive structure for the next attempt. You have to celebrate those stumbles as proof that you are moving past rote learning into real, spontaneous, and messy expression.
The journey we've described, from that translation lag to fluid, direct thought, It can feel abstract, but it's reality for millions of successful learners. And these transformation stories, they validate the struggle and they illustrate the incredible sense of freedom that direct thinking unlocks.
The anecdotes show the tangible results of that rewiring. I mean, think of Hiroko, who was learning English from Japanese. She described the realization that she was writing complex professional work emails, not casual notes, but detailed technical correspondence, without having run a single sentence through a mental translator first.
Wow.
That subconscious shift from reliance to automaticity is the marker of true cognitive integration.
And Miguel, who was learning French from his native Spanish, he realized true bilingualism, not just in his vocabulary, but in the social function of his language. He said he knew he had arrived when his jokes started landing and getting spontaneous, genuine laughter from his French colleagues, rather than requiring an awkward pause and an explanation.
Exactly. Humor and quick wit are nearly impossible to achieve when your brain is busy translating punchlines.
Right.
Then there's Anna, learning German from Russian, who reported the definitive breakthrough when she started dreaming in German.
To dream in a language is the ultimate sign of neurological adoption.
It is. It means the language has moved from the conscious problem-solving region of the brain into the unconscious ambient reality of the mind.
And Sam, moving from English to Mandarin, shared the intensity of being able to successfully argue about complex political theory in Mandarin without ever needing to check back in English. That ability to handle high-level, abstract, emotionally charged debate proves the full depth of cognitive flexibility has kicked in.
And all these narratives, they share a common thread. A profound sense of freedom, and a deeper, unfiltered emotional connection to the people and the culture. The world truly changes when you stop translating it.
Yet, despite these inspiring stories, the journey is plagued by common myths that hold learners captive in that translation loop. We need to empower you, the listener, by addressing these directly.
Let's start with myth 1. Only gifted people can stop translating.
And the reality, backed by neuroplasticity research, is that anyone can cultivate this ability. It is an acquired skill, much like mastering a musical instrument or learning to fly a plane. It requires dedication, but not a special linguistic gene.
Your brain is ready to reorganize. You just have to give it the consistent, pressure-filled input it needs.
Next, myth 2. You must live abroad to achieve it.
While geographical immersion provides high-intensity pressure, the reality in our modern world is that daily mini-immersions, using media, online exchanges, and focused self-talk, are highly effective substitutes.
The brain doesn't know if the audio input is coming from Paris or your living room.
No, it only recognizes the consistent native exposure. You can absolutely bring the immersion environment to your home.
Myth 3. You need to have perfect grammar first.
This is perhaps the most destructive myth. The reality is that fluency is achieved not by mastering rules, but by practicing use. Grammar emerges naturally from constant direct expression and absorption of patterns, just as children speak fluently before they ever encounter a conjugation chart.
Trying to achieve perfection before expressing yourself keeps you stuck in that analytical translation loop. You have to move past analysis and into synthesis.
And finally, myth 4. If you make mistakes, you haven't arrived.
Quite the opposite. Mistakes are proof of bravery. They signal that you're moving past the safety of rote memorization and into the difficult, messy, but ultimately rewarding territory of real, spontaneous communication.
Every mistake is a data point the brain uses to refine its implicit grammar rules. So you should celebrate those errors. They mean you are truly moving forward toward direct thought. As we conclude this deep dive, it's vital to zoom out and reflect on the most profound, lifelong implications of this linguistic transformation. The rewards transcend mere cognitive speed or communication efficiency.
This is where language learning evolves into genuine identity exploration and really psychological expansion. The first major reward is a quantifiable increase in empathy.
Yes. Direct thought forces you to inhabit another's worldview on a fundamental level. You begin to appreciate cultural differences, how time is valued, how personal space is defined, how emotions are expressed, not as arbitrary oddities, but as natural logical extensions of a different mental universe shaped by the language itself.
Your framework for understanding global human behavior expands dramatically. It increases your capacity for genuine connection.
And this leads directly into the concept of identity expansion. The vast majority of people who achieve fluency report adopting a new facet of themselves. They may find they take on different mannerisms, a distinct type of humor, or even an entirely new inner voice in the second language that's more confident or more reserved or more expressive.
And it's important for you to realize this is a gain, not a loss.
Absolutely. Your original self is intact, but you've acquired a new, highly specialized layer, a calibrated social persona optimized for interacting within that specific linguistic and cultural matrix. You are not losing yourself. You are duplicating and diversifying your selfhood.
And the final reward is one that speaks directly to the long-term maintenance of the brain itself: lifelong cognitive health.
Research consistently links sustained active bilingualism, especially the practice of operating without translation and constantly code switching, to significantly increased cognitive reserve. This practice strengthens the brain's ability to resist the damage associated with aging. Studies strongly suggest that the constant maintenance and flexing of that dual language system actively delays the onset of age-related mental decline. It keeps the core processing engine agile and resilient.
That is the ultimate payoff. The patience, the hard work, and the willingness to stumble literally rewires your brain in a way that protects your cognitive function decades into the future.
It circles back to the most fundamental philosophical note regarding language itself. Language is not just a mechanism for describing reality, it is a mechanism that creates reality. When you stop translating, you stop observing the world through the window of your first language. You step outside, you breathe the air of the new culture, and you interact with reality directly, fundamentally shaping your own experience in the process.
This journey, from the exhaustion of word-by-word translation to the liberation of unfiltered thought, is one of the most radical cognitive shifts a person can undergo. It is entirely accessible to every learner, but it requires patience, focused, high-intensity practice, and a fundamental willingness to stumble and be gloriously imperfect.
Every single time you choose to speak, write, or think directly in the new language, you are reinforcing those new, efficient neural pathways. You're actively weakening the reliance on the L1 detour, opening the door to greater fluency, deeper authenticity, and genuinely meaningful human connection.
Give yourself permission to let that clumsy, exhausting mental translation fade. Accept the struggle, knowing that that struggle is being replaced by true understanding, gut intuition, and the joy of genuine, unmediated expression. The real magic begins not when you can successfully translate everything you want to say, but when you no longer need to. That is when you are not just learning a language, you are truly living it. You know the feeling.
Yeah.
It's one of those high-stakes moments.
Yeah.
Maybe you're about to step on stage, or you're in a big meeting.
Or even just trying to have a conversation in a language you've studied for years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You've done all the prep, the words, the facts, the skill, it's all there.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be.
It's locked away, but then the pressure hits.
And your mind just starts racing with this hypercritical voice. Did I say that right? Was that the correct word? That sounded ridiculous.
And all those perfectly good ideas just start swirling around and they get tangled. They refuse to come out as a clear, simple action.
It's like a complete system shutdown all of a sudden.
It is. You go from feeling totally prepared to feeling completely paralyzed. And that knowledge, which should be your best asset, it suddenly feels like this huge weight.
Because you're terrified of using it wrong.
Precisely.
And that feeling, that shutdown, it feels so real, so physical. And our sources all point to one main antagonist behind it all: overthinking.
Mm-hmm.
So today's deep dive is all about that quiet sabotage. We're going to dissect how overthinking blocks us from getting into that state of effortless flow, that thing we call fluency.
And our mission here is really to give you a full picture. We've pulled from, psycholinguistics, performance psychology, cognitive science.
All the heavy hitters.
All of them, yeah. To detail exactly why this paralysis by analysis happens, what it's costing your brain, and most importantly,
What to do about it.
what to do about it. We're laying out a whole toolkit of actionable strategies to break that cycle and finally, find your natural flow.
So this is your shortcut. It's not just about knowing what fluency is, but getting the real research-backed scoop on how to get there.
And it doesn't matter if you're learning a language or starting a creative project or even just prepping for a big presentation.
It's about getting your mental resources working for you, not against you, especially when you need them most. Okay, so let's unpack this. Before we can really go after the enemy here, overthinking, we have to be crystal clear on the goal. What is fluency, really?
Right, because our sources make it so clear that the common idea of fluency is, It's not just wrong, it's actually harmful.
The idea that it means perfection, no mistakes.
Exactly. Flawless grammar, perfect technical skill. Aiming for that impossible standard just sets you up to fail. It encourages that hyper-monitoring we're trying to stop.
So what's the real definition then?
True fluency it's much simpler. It's less about being perfect and way more about the ability to communicate your ideas naturally and easily.
Without getting stuck.
Without getting stuck in your own head.
Yeah. Okay, so if I'm speaking, say, Spanish, and I stumble over a word, but the person I'm talking to completely understands my complex idea, is that fluency?
That is a perfect moment of fluency. Absolutely. The second you get the meaning across and keep the conversation moving, you've done it.
So what are the core parts of it then?
The sources point to three main things. First is effortless flow. That's when your ideas move from your brain to your mouth or your hands without any real interruption.
Just seamless.
Seamless. The second part, and this one is crucial, is confidence amidst imperfection.
Ooh, I like that.
It's that willingness to just keep going, even if you make a mistake. A fluent person doesn't stop the whole train to go back and fix one little error.
They just absorb it and keep moving forward.
Exactly. You prioritize the message over the mistake.
And the third part?
Spontaneity. It's the ability to react and adapt in real time. You're not just reading a script from your memory, you're actually creating and responding in the moment.
In a conversation or a presentation or even playing music.
Any of it. It's about being present and flexible.
So what I'm hearing is that fluency is, by its nature, kind of messy. It's human.
It is, and accepting that messiness is probably the first step. The research is overwhelming on this. Fluency is as much a psychological state as it is a technical skill.
If you're relaxed and confident, the skills are there.
They're right there at your fingertips. But if you're anxious and you're self-monitoring, those same skills they seem to vanish. They get blocked by all that internal noise.
And this is where it gets really, really interesting for me, because this idea isn't just for language learners.
Not at all. That's the big takeaway here. This concept of fluency, or flow, it applies to any area that requires that mix of skill and speed.
Like a painter or a coder.
Or a coder writing elegant script without constantly looking things up. Their fingers just seem to know what to do.
Or what about just having a difficult conversation? One of those emotionally charged ones where you have to adapt what you're saying mid-sentence.
That's a perfect example. Or an athlete. Think about a basketball player on a fast break. The second they start consciously thinking, okay, where's my left foot? What's my wrist angle?
It all falls apart.
The whole thing collapses.
It's like a magic state.
It is. Regardless of what you're doing, language, art, sports fluency is that sweet spot. It's where your skill, your intuition, and your actions all line up perfectly. And it's that state that overthinking just completely sabotages. So if fluency is that alignment, that flow, then overthinking is the complete destructive misalignment. Our sources define it very specifically. It's excessive mental analysis and self-monitoring, particularly in those moments that demand you be spontaneous.
It's like your inner editor, the voice that's supposed to help you revise things later.
Right, in the review phase.
Yeah, that voice decides to step in and try to direct the whole movie while you're still filming it.
That's a great way to put it. And that inner monologue, it's just relentless.
The sources really nail the sound of that self-sabotage.
Oh, they do. If you're trying to speak, it's this constant stream of questions. Wait, was that the right tense? Oh, did I make a grammar mistake 3 words ago? Will they judge my accent?
And each one of those questions is like pulling the emergency brake. You just can't get any momentum.
None. And the result is that classic paralysis by analysis. You spend so much time evaluating that you never get to the part where you actually do something.
You stop communicating and you start correcting.
And we need to understand where this comes from. It's a natural response to uncertainty. But it's driven by these really powerful forces.
Like what?
Well, the fear of making mistakes, for one. Fear of embarrassment.
And the social stakes.
Huge social stakes. Then there's perfectionism, that desire to control every little detail of your output. And, of course, past negative experiences. Your brain replays them to try to protect you.
And you mentioned earlier, our education system can sometimes train us for this.
Yeah.
All that focus on getting the right answer, on not making mistakes.
Absolutely. We're often conditioned to be critics first and participants second. And that becomes a neurological habit. But here's the most important piece from the cognitive science side of things.
Okay.
The cognitive cost. This isn't just a mental quirk. It's a massive, measurable drain on your brain's resources.
Tell me more about that. How does it drain your resources?
Your brain has a finite amount of processing power at any given moment. We call it working memory. When you overthink, you hijack that working memory.
So instead of using it to come up with the next thing to say,
You're using it to scrutinize the last thing you said, or to calculate all the ways the next thing could go wrong. It turns simple, automatic tasks into these slow, painful processes.
so you're basically using all your processing power to run a constant diagnostic check on yourself instead of, actually running the program.
That's a perfect analogy. Fluent people, experts, they rely on fast, unconscious processing. It's intuitive, it's automatic.
It's muscle memory.
Right. But overthinkers disrupt that beautiful, efficient system with what the research calls conscious override.
Conscious override. That term just says it all, doesn't it?
It really was. You're forcing your conscious, analytical brain onto a process that needs to be reflexive.
And that's what causes the hesitation, the stumbles.
It causes the very errors you were trying to avoid. It's been shown in language, in sports psychology. They call it choking under pressure. Elite athletes who suddenly start thinking too hard about a well-practiced move, they perform like beginners.
Because they're trying too hard to micromanage their own intuition.
Exactly that.
Okay, so let's follow that. That massive cognitive cost, that conscious override, when that kicks in, spontaneity is it's dead on arrival.
Instantly. The whole thing shifts from being a creative exchange to being this high-stakes test that you're giving yourself inside your own head.
And that leads to the really insidious part, right? The way it sustains itself.
The negative feedback loop, yes. Our sources detail this self-perpetuating cycle, and it's why this habit is so hard to break.
Okay, so walk us through that spiral.
It starts with monitoring. You start obsessively checking your output. How do I sound? Is this right?
And that uses up all that working memory we just talked about.
It does, which leads to step 2, stilted output. Because your resources are diverted, your actual performance, your speech, your writing, it becomes unnatural. It's full of pauses and corrections.
And the person you're talking to can feel that. They notice that unnatural rhythm.
They do. Which brings us to step 3, increased anxiety. The less fluent you sound, the more you worry about how you're being perceived. The embarrassment factor just shoots up.
And more anxiety leads to...
Step 4, intensified monitoring. You double down on the self-correction, which starts the whole vicious cycle over again, only this time with even more pressure.
Wow. So the very act of trying to be perfect guarantees that you'll perform worse than you actually can. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It is, and this idea is so central to learning that there's a specific term for it. We have to talk about the linguist Stephen Creation and his affective filter hypothesis.
Okay, the affective filter. This sounds like a key term for our listeners. What is it?
Creation described the affective filter as a kind of a mental barrier, an emotional gate that goes up when you're feeling anxious or have low self-esteem or high self-doubt.
And when that gate is up?
When the filter is high, it literally blocks new information from getting in, and crucially, it stops you from retrieving knowledge you already have.
So it's not just making you hesitate, it's actively stopping you from finding the words you know are in there.
Exactly. Our sources call overthinking the ultimate affective filter. It locks the gate, the word is there, you know it, but the signal is blocked by your own self-criticism.
Which explains that awful feeling of, you know more than you can show. The knowledge is there, but you can't get to it.
Right. Your brain is so busy defending you from the idea of embarrassment that it completely neglects its main job, which is to communicate.
And we have to keep saying it. This isn't just about language. This is the enemy of all creative flow.
Absolutely. The pattern is identical.
I mean, the sources give some painful examples.
The classic one is the writer who just rewrites the first sentence 100 times. They're so paralyzed by perfectionism, they never get to page 2.
Or the musician who freezes mid-solo because they're analyzing the last few notes they played.
Yes. They completely disconnect from the music, from the audience.
They pull themselves out of the moment.
Yeah.
They're not in the performance anymore. They're in the analysis room critiquing it.
And that's the core of it. Overthinking yanks you out of the present, locks you in self-critique about the past, and it breaks that essential connection. Connection to your audience, to your partner, to the work itself. The energy just turns inward and becomes anxiety.
Okay, so we've got the mechanism down the spiral, the resource drain, that affective filter. Now let's get really specific about the triggers. What flips that switch from being prepared to being paralyzed?
Well, if you drill down deep enough, the core trigger, almost universally, is the fear of judgment. It's that deep, primal fear of being evaluated. either by other people, a boss, a client, or maybe even more relentlessly, by that harsh internal critic we all have.
And that fear isn't just a feeling. It kicks off a specific mental state, right?
It does. It puts you in a state of hypervigilance. It's a low-level fight or flight response. And your focus shifts completely. Instead of thinking about what you want to say,
The message.
the idea, you become obsessed with how you'll be perceived. And that inward focus is an instant flow killer.
And then there are those other two big triggers, past mistakes and perfectionism.
Yes. Past negative experiences are incredibly powerful. You have one really embarrassing language mistake or you mess up a big presentation, and your brain logs that as a major threat.
So it replays it for you as a warning.
Exactly. It creates this mental barrier, and every time you avoid a similar situation, you're telling your brain, see, avoidance keeps us safe.
Which just reinforces the whole pattern.
It's a self-limiting loop. And then you've got its partner in crime, perfectionism.
Right. The whole, if I can't do it perfectly, I shouldn't do it at all mindset.
The all or nothing thinking. It's so paralyzing because, as we've said, perfection is impossible in spontaneous human things like conversation or creativity.
So the pressure you put on yourself to be flawless actually makes it more likely you'll mess up.
It makes it almost certain. The higher the pressure, the worse the performance.
Okay, so when we fall into these traps, what's the real cost? What are we actually losing? It's more than just a bit of awkwardness.
Oh, the costs are huge and they add up over time. The first one is a loss of opportunities for practice.
Because you're avoiding the very situations you need to be in to get better.
Exactly. You can't get better at speaking if you don't speak. And real practice always includes making mistakes. There's no way around it.
The second cost is the erosion of confidence.
Every time you second guess yourself, you're training your brain to distrust its own instincts. Over time, that snowballs into a core belief that you just can't do it.
And then the irony of the third cost, reduced comprehension and recall.
It's the ultimate paradox. The research is so clear on this. The more an anxious person tries to get it right, the less they can actually remember.
Right.
Because that hypervigilance chews up all the working memory, and that blocks the pathways to your long-term memory where all the good stuff is stored. Your struggle to be perfect literally makes your memory worse in the moment.
Wow. And the final cost.
Damaged relationships. This isn't just happening inside your head. People can feel it. That hesitation, that self-doubt, it can come across as distance or even inauthenticity.
So you accidentally built a wall right where you were trying to build a bridge.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
You know, sometimes the best way to really get this is to look at people who have actually solved the problem. And we've got two really powerful stories from the sources that show that path from paralysis to progress.
Yeah, let's start with Maria, the engineer.
Okay.
Maria's from Brazil, a brilliant engineer, moves to an English-speaking country for a big job. She studied English for years, has great test scores.
The technical knowledge is all there.
All there, but when meetings got fast-paced or conversations were informal, she would just clam up completely.
Classic overthinking. What was going on in her head?
The source notes detail. It was things like, I'm comparing my sentences to the native speakers. By the time I find the perfect technical term, the conversation's moved on. If I make a grammar mistake, they'll think I'm a bad engineer.
So she just became an observer.
In her own professional life, yes. She barely contributed in brainstorming sessions, even though she had the best ideas.
So what was the breakthrough for her? How did she get past that?
It was a conscious strategy, not more studying. A mentor told her to make a radical shift. Focus only on sharing her ideas and stop worrying about perfect English.
Still changing the goal.
Completely. And they structured it. She had to practice in low-pressure settings like coffee breaks, and she was told to use simple functional language. And this is key to use pre-learned filler phrases.
Like
things
that.
like, in my view, or let me rephrase that. Just to keep the momentum going, to avoid that dreaded pause where the critic jumps in.
So she learned to accept imperfection.
She did. And her fluency came from that, from participating and accepting mistakes, not from trying to be grammatically perfect.
That is such a powerful shift. Okay, now let's look at the creative side with Alex, the musician.
Right. So Alex is a guitarist, technically very skilled, but he was obsessed with playing every single note perfectly live.
I can see where this is going.
The more he tried to consciously control every finger movement, every chord change, the more mistakes he made. He got stiff, he lost the rhythm.
Choking under pressure.
Textbook case. His breakthrough happened during a show. He got so frustrated that he just let go. He stopped thinking about the notes and started thinking only about the emotion he wanted to convey.
He started improvising.
He shifted from monitoring to expression. And his musical fluency, his ability to create in the moment, it just exploded.
So in both stories, it's not about lowering your standards. Maria was still a brilliant engineer. Alex was still a great guitarist.
Exactly. It's about shifting your focus from internal monitoring to external connection and expression.
Which brings us right to the science behind this, the science of flow state.
Coined by the psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi.
Right, flow. That feeling of being so immersed in what you're doing that you lose track of time, you lose your self-consciousness.
In a state of flow, your attention is focused entirely outward, on the task, not inward on yourself.
Yeah.
You're fully engaged in what you're doing, not critiquing how you're doing it.
Okay, so what is actually happening in the brain that allows that to happen? How do you get that internal critic to take a break?
This is where it gets really cool. When you're overthinking, your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for analysis and self-control, is in overdrive.
The executive function.
Right. But in a flow state, neuroscientists see something called transient hypofrontality. It means that part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, actually quiets down temporarily.
So the internal critic literally goes on vacation.
For a little while, yes. And that allows the more automatic, intuitive parts of the brain, the basal ganglia, where all your well-learned skills are stored, to take over without interference. That's why relaxed conversations flow and anxious speakers freeze. To get to fluency, you actually have to get your conscious mind out of the way.
Okay, so we've got the why, the how, the science of flow. Now for the big question, the application. What are the concrete strategies we can use to override this overthinking habit?
The first one is the biggest. It's the foundation for everything else. You have to redefine success. Move the goalposts from perfection to connection.
So the main goal isn't to say something perfectly, it's just to be understood.
To express your idea, to share a feeling, to connect. If the other person gets your meaning, you've won. That's a successful interaction. It immediately lowers the stakes.
I have to push back a little on that, though. What about situations where precision is critical? Like you're a surgeon or a lawyer negotiating a contract, you can't just aim for good enough.
That's a great and really important question. The key here is the difference between preparation and execution. The precision comes in the deep practice, in the preparation. You automate the skills.
Okay.
The overthinking happens when you try to bring that intense analysis into the moment of execution. So redefining success in that context means focusing on completing the next step of the process, not ruminating on the perfection of the last step you just took.
Got it. It's about forward momentum. Okay, what's strategy number 2?
Embrace mistakes as data. This is a huge mental shift. A mistake isn't a failure. It's not a reflection of your worth. It's just feedback.
It tells you what you need to work on.
Exactly. And the sources suggest a great practical tool for this, a mistake journal.
Which sounds terrifying, I have to say. A journal of all my failures.
No, it's not a record of shame. It's a map. For each mistake, you log the context, the error itself, and then the correction. It turns that emotional sting of a mistake into an objective, actionable learning tool.
I like that. Turning self-critique into calibration. Okay, strategy 3.
Practice under pressure, but start small. You have to expose yourself to the things you fear, but you do it gradually.
So you don't jump into the deep end.
You don't. If you fear public speaking, you don't start with a keynote. You start by presenting to one trusted friend, then 2. You build up your tolerance and your confidence in small, manageable steps.
Okay, that makes sense. Strategy 4 is a bit more technical. It's about reducing that cognitive load, chunking.
Yes, this is a classic from cognitive psychology. Instead of your brain trying to build every sentence from scratch or play every musical phrase note by note, you learn to use larger, automatic chunks.
Give me some examples.
In language, it's memorized phrases, idioms, common greetings. In music, it's familiar chord progressions. In coding, it's using a function you've already written.
So you automate the building blocks.
Right. And that frees up your brain's processing power to focus on the bigger picture, the meaning, the emotion, the strategy.
Which leads right into the last 2 strategies, trust and mindfulness.
Exactly. Strategy 5, prepare, then trust. You have to do the work, you have to prepare, but at some point you have to stop preparing and trust that the work is done. You have to let go.
Over-preparation can be a trap.
It's the overthinker's favorite trap. It leads to rigidity. The goal is to be prepared enough to be flexible. And finally, strategy 6, mindfulness and self-compassion.
For when that anxiety starts to bubble up anyway.
Yes, things like deep breathing or meditation train your mind to simply notice the overthinking voice without getting swept away by it. You learn to pause, acknowledge it, there's that voice again, and then gently bring your focus back to the present moment. You see the thought, but you don't have to get on the train.
So, as we've been saying this whole time, fluency isn't some destination you just arrive at one day. It's a practice, a daily habit.
Absolutely. So what do those habits look like? How do you maintain this state of flow?
Where do we start?
First, your environment is everything. You have to create a supportive environment. Overthinking thrives in places where you feel judged.
So you have to find your people.
You have to find your people. Seek out conversation clubs or workshops or online groups that value growth over perfection. You need to be in a safe mistake zone.
A place where mistakes are seen as proof that you're trying.
Exactly, where they're not just tolerated, but maybe even welcomed. That immediately lowers that affective filter we talked about.
Okay, so find a safe space. What's next?
Change your mindset from performance to play. Play, don't perform.
I love that.
Think about how kids learn. They're just curious. They explore, they make up words, they laugh at themselves. They're not worried about being judged.
Right. The goal is discovery, not a perfect presentation.
Exactly. If you bring that playful, curious energy to what you're doing, the self-consciousness just melts away. And you have to track your progress.
Because overthinkers are great at noticing their failures, but not so great at seeing their wins.
Terrible at it. So you have to consciously track your micro victories, keep a log of the times you spoke up or created something freely, or just push through a moment of hesitation.
Even if it wasn't perfect.
Especially if it wasn't perfect. Real, lasting confidence is built on those small acts of courage. You're training your brain to see the evidence of its own competence.
And finally, don't try to do this all by yourself.
No. Build a support network. Surround yourself with people who get it. Mentors, peers, other learners who reinforce the idea that expression matters more than perfection.
Just knowing you're not the only one struggling with this.
It's huge. It takes away so much of the shame and isolation that fuels the whole cycle. So to sort of bring this all together, overthinking, it's a very human instinct, right? It's a defense mechanism. But fluency, that state of effortless, effective action, that belongs to the people who are willing to risk being imperfect.
Who are willing to step into the present moment, find courage in connecting with others, and trust their own instincts.
And for you listening, the big takeaway here is this. It's not about getting every single word right. It's about letting people into your story, flaws and all.
You already know more. You're already more skilled than they give yourself credit for. The overthinking is just hiding it.
So remember these key rules from the sources. Progress comes from participation, not perfection.
Mistakes are just learning in motion.
And confidence is built action by action.
So what does this mean for you the next time you have that chance to speak or create or perform?
We want to leave you with a final thought, a different question to ask yourself. Next time you feel your mind start to race, don't ask that old paralyzing question, is this perfect?
What should you ask instead?
Just pause, take a breath, and instead ask yourself, what do I most want to express right now?
That's a powerful shift.
It is. Let go of perfection. Focus on that intention, on that desire to connect. And trust that if you speak from that place, fluency will follow. The world needs your voice unfiltered, unedited, and alive.